unfortunately that this spill did happen, but it has refocused the country's attention, you could say, I guess, on these issue of train derailments, the issues of the railroads, many of the things that the railroad workers were trying to point us to during their contract struggle at the end of 2022. And we are very happy to be joined as we continue the conversation by Matt Weaver, who's the BMWED IBT Ohio Legislative Director and the Rail Workers United ISC member, or a Rail Workers United ISC member. Matt, thanks so much for being with us.
Hello, everyone. How are you guys? I really appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us, and we're doing well. And of course, now in Van Buren Township outside of Detroit, there's been another derailment of a train that was carrying chemicals. It looks, thankfully, that there may not be a spill yet. But I guess my first question for you, Matt, is, I mean, should we have seen these things coming? Because I think a lot of times these are presented as just freak accidents.
I believe that many of the rail labor groups have announced concerns like this on deferred maintenance, on lack of manpower, on poor resting times for our train crews, things like that. Railroad Workers United, railroadworkersunited.org, has been talking about this for months. It's a shame to watch, kind of like Band-Aid on a broken leg maintenance. And in this specific one in Ohio, you can't speculate on the exact cause till the NTSB report comes out, but our car inspectors, the machinists and BRC, Brotherhood of Railway Carmen, have been mandated to reduce inspection times. Used to be 2 guys working 4 or 5 minutes to inspect each car. Those numbers are down to 90 seconds, sometimes less than a minute, that they're mandating that we are the rail workers are inspecting cars that much quicker, and it gives a lot of opportunity to miss things such as a hot journal, a worn bearing, air hoses, brake hoses, that kind of stuff. Mm.
And so when we talk about what's happened now, I mean, obviously residents are being told everything's fine. Is everything fine?
I would prefer that they do some independent testing instead of something coming from the carrier. You can often pay for the results you want. You know how that game is played. I would think they should err on the side of safety. I know that, even the administration in DC offered help, and Governor DeWine declined that. He said he didn't call back for that. I don't understand that, because I see people all the time saying, well, what's Biden doing about it? Well, he offered, and he was declined by the governor.
Mm. And, I guess one of the things that is just so notable to me is it's not only that, and I'm glad you gave the context of the cutbacks, but I mean, it really seems that it's not because somehow these companies are strapped for cash. I mean, it feels that these railroad companies are some of the biggest, most profitable companies out there. Is that right?
Record profits. There is no other industry that has profit margins that are, creeping up. They're shooting for operating ratios of 55. Fast food has operating ratios of 85, 90. So the shareholders are getting, that much more money. It's a very wealthy industry. And as you can see in the video you're showing right now, trains don't run through wealthy people's backyards. That's working class families and neighborhoods that are suffering through this.
I want to ask about accountability, because in the aftermath of this, I saw that there was a meeting where the rail firm actually pulled out of. It was a meeting with residents. So is there any accountability here at all? Like, are there officials at least advocating, local officials? Are there any local officials advocating for the community that's been affected by this? Let alone for the workers who've probably are who have been work on the trains and deal with this on a regular basis?
I've seen some comments from local officials who are trying to get answers and help their constituents. I've been a bit disappointed with the Department of Transportation. Pete Buttigieg has seemed to be slow off the starting blocks on this, and I really had my hopes up when he was appointed. I think we need our regulators to regulate. We need our public servants to serve the public. and let's make society better for the working class in America, because times are tough for the workers.
And I wonder if, and I know this conversation has also been certainly something Rail Workers United has really, I think, put in front of the country quite well, since the contract fight. I mean, the very issue of the ownership of the railroads. I mean, I think that the United States is actually now leading, I don't know, someone told me they're leading the world. There's a large number of train derailments, it seems, on a regular basis. And I mean, is this sort of private ownership model itself part of the problem?
That is an interesting aspect, and there are very good arguments about nationalizing the railroads. I would prefer to see good regulation first, but how can you trust a private industry that is touting record profits and dividends? How can you trust them to self-regulate? That's not possible. Those ideas of self-regulation of a for-profit industry is pie in the sky thoughts. It's not realistic.
So, okay, that's one thing, nationalizing the rails, but like, what could have prevented this specific incident? What kind of safety protocols that aren't in place could have prevented this?
I I would venture to say that a more thorough inspection of the car may have helped. Hot box detectors more often on the tracks as the trains go by. They can discover if there's been a hot journal. This train, from what I hear, has gone over 20 miles with flames or with sparks coming out of the journal or the bearing before it derailed. So that's a lot of time where you have the opportunity to stop the train. And like you guys had said before, there was better regulation that kind of got gutted during the Obama administration, but then it was completely eliminated during the Trump administration. So they're making plenty of money. Let's do better.
Mm. Well, and I wonder from the perspective, just of the rights of workers. I mean, I've been thinking about the Railway Labor Act. And of course, as I mentioned before, and as you mentioned, I mean, rail workers were really ringing the alarm bell on this, saying we have big issues with staffing and safety. And it just makes me wonder if, another problem here is the fact that we've by basically making it very, very difficult for workers to strike, it's almost like we've made it more difficult to address the issues because workers aren't able to use their own labor power to say, well, hold on, we got to put a stop to this thing until we get this fixed.
Especially in this round of bargaining, that's exactly what happened. During the STB hearings, the shippers were kind of on our side saying, hey, hire more people, get the trains to us, haul our goods away, that kind of stuff. And then towards the end of bargaining, the shippers turned on us and asked Congress to impose the contract. That's not the voice of the people. I mean, we need to have public servants serving the constituents. We need to have regulation that serves society. The idea that the railroad spends so much money lobbying politicians. They have, I testified for the Ohio House Transportation Committee about crossing safety and two-man crew bills, and there were lobbyists in the back room just listening into what I had to say. There's a lot of power in the railroad. I mean, in 1900, there were 132 Class 1 railroads. Now there's 7, perhaps a merger to make it 6. We're looking at the monopoly board. There were 4 railroads on the monopoly board, and they have a lot of power. I asked you guys not to use my employer's name just because of fear of retaliation.
I wanted to ask you something about, Pete Buttigieg, who's obviously transportation secretary, he gave this interview where he tried to kind of shift some of the blame onto Donald Trump. I think he actually even tweeted about it. Basically, there's some ruling that was overturned by the Trump administration back in 2018 or withdrawn by the Trump administration back in 2018, requiring trains carrying certain dangerous chemicals to use these electronically controlled brakes. And he was saying that this was partly the result of that. I'm just curious, is there any truth to that? And 2, is there a difference in the way these two parties deal with these issues, or is it kind of a bipartisan situation where both parties seem to be captured by these very powerful companies?
From what I read, it is true that they did studies and there was an agenda or pressure to show that the cost effectiveness of this braking system, it wasn't worth the return on investment. They're looking for ROI, and it wasn't. It's there's still debate on if the electronic brakes would have hampered or slowed the train quicker or better or more evenly. But let's study that. Let's investigate that stuff. And I do see a difference in the parties, but I am a little frustrated with having to vote for what seems to be the lesser of two evils every 2 or 4 years.
Understandable. And then I wanted to also ask you, the photos of this are horrifying. The images of this are horrifying. The aftermath is horrifying. But this isn't the only derailment. Eugene mentioned before we started this interview that there was another derailment that happened in just the last few hours, I believe, in Michigan, just outside of Detroit. And I saw that there's been over like 1,000 derailments. I think that was the number over a certain time period. That's kind of a shocking number. Obviously, not every derailment is this catastrophic. But all that being said, is this unique what happened, or is this something we should see as like a warning of what could also continue to happen? Like, how concerned should we be about the potential for more derailments like this?
Derailments in yards are a bit more common in the yard, in the switching yards, on the switching leads, that kind of thing. This one has really grabbed the media's attention. Like I said, I appreciate your guys' attention. But don't get me wrong, we don't want these chemicals on the highways. That would be much worse. Accidents on the highways are far more often. Rail is definitely the safest way to move these chemicals across the country. I've had friends who say, "Oh, it should be a pipeline." Well, you can't have a different pipeline for every single chemical across the world. You can't have a grid of pipelines for vinyl chloride. You can't have a grid of pipelines for petroleum. That's just not realistic. Pipelines are not the answer in the circumstance. Safer transportation is.
Well, let me also just ask you this, because I think that's a very good point. Where can people find out more about what you all are doing at Rail Workers United or anywhere else that seems relevant? Because I think a lot of folks, of course, were very positively inclined towards what was happening during the contract period, and seeing this now are thinking we have to do more to get behind rail workers.
There was an additional press release from railroadworkersunited.org today. It had 4 or 5 articles. I even got some time on the Jon Stewart show yesterday.
Nice.
And they've done well. We have a media committee of 16 or 18 people and of various crafts. So somebody talks about a machinist or a carman or an engineer conductor. Somebody can go there, send any of us an email, go on Facebook and find it, and we will get the right person to get the right. Just like you said earlier, it's not good business to speculate on these things. So the finger pointing will always begin, but let's leave it in the hands of the NTSB for now. And let's ask Norfolk Southern to step up and do right by the citizens of this town who are dealing with this.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. Matt Weaver, BMW ED IBT Ohio Legislative Director and a member of the ISC at Railroad Workers United. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Thanks, you guys. I really appreciate you guys. Have a great day.
No, you too. It's our pleasure.